Time for another episode of Inclusion Talks, and we're here for Aussie Home Loans who deal with anyone in Australia. We've got clients in every state and capital, and their areas of expertise include purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, and of course, all sorts of loans, whether they be equipment, car, personal, and they've got over 25 lenders on their panel. My name's Dan Lonigan, and of course my co-host for Inclusion Talks, her idea of this program, and it's an absolute ripper. It's getting great traction and great interest. Cindy McDougall, welcome, Cindy. Good to have you with us once again.
Great to be back, Dan.
Now, who have we got this week? We've got a star, haven't we? I mean, they're all stars, but this young lady, a dual Paralympian. Tell us all about it.
Certainly is. So today on our Inclusion Talks episode, we welcome Sarah Walsh, dual Paralympian, achieving great results in both Rio and Tokyo Paralympics and aiming for her third Paralympics berth this August in Paris. A multiple Australian international athletics representative, state medalist, and an athlete who has risen through from grassroots sport and began her career at age 9 through school, grew her skills through Little Athletics New South Wales. Sarah is a T64 athlete whose event of choice is long jump. T64, for those who are not sure how disability classification in athletics works, is a classification for amputee athletes. Sarah, with no pun intended, has the world at her feet. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you on board. So we'll get straight into it. Your disability has been something that you've no doubt been aware of since you were extremely young. Did you ever feel like it was something that made you conscious of being different to others?
Not really. So I was born with a condition called fibular hemimelia. So essentially that means that when I was born, I was missing one bone below my knee on my right side. And those that don't know too much about how your leg is supposed to be, supposed to have 2 bones below your knee, a foot with 5 toes. My foot also didn't form properly as well, so it didn't have all of its toes. So I had my foot amputated when I was 18 months old, and I've worn a prosthetic leg ever since then. So I guess for me, I'd always had that. I looked slightly different to other people, but I never felt any different. I was always treated at school as one equal, like all my other friends or classmates as well. And there was never a time where I really felt that my leg was hindering me or made me very different to the other people that I was around. And these days, I don't think I'd be doing what I would or what I do now if I didn't have my leg. So it's probably been one of my greatest assets.
Did you approach sport at an early age? Did you ever have people say to you that you couldn't do sport because of your disability?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents always encouraged me, though, to get out there and give everything a go. They never wanted my prosthetic to stop me from doing anything. So they threw me into every sport possible. So growing up, I did swimming, gymnastics, dancing, netball, wheelchair basketball. I found athletics a little bit later in my childhood, surfing. There was never a time that they told me that I couldn't do something. I just kind of had to figure out for myself what sports either I like to do or the ones that may have been a little bit more challenging with my prosthetic. The only sport that I told them that I wanted to quit and I'd had enough of was dancing, because I couldn't point my toes on my right side, which is the side of my prosthetic. To this day, 25 years later, I still can't point my toes on my right side. I'm never going to be able to do that, but I thought that would be a great way to get out of dancing. But mum paid for the rest of the term, so she wasn't letting me off the hook that easily. But during school, like, I was always playing sport with all my classmates. And yeah, there was probably times where I wasn't the fastest out there chasing after the ball, or I definitely wasn't the most coordinated, which has absolutely nothing to do with my prosthetic. But I just really enjoyed sport, and there were probably people on the sidelines that really questioned whether or not I should be out there doing that and whether or not it was a good idea. But their judgment never made it to me.
I'm so glad that you kept that focus and didn't listen to those people and the noise from the outside. You said that your sporting journey really kicked off in school. Little Ass, you did Little Ass for Little Ath New South Wales. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Was it multi-class back then, or were you in with the able-bodieds? And how did that look for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey into Little Aths was probably a little bit backwards compared to most people. I think most people get into Little A's and then kind of that's how they progress through the school sporting system. I actually had already started athletics in the school sporting system before I then joined Little A's. I kind of figured out that I was actually quite good at athletics and maybe needed to do a little bit more training and have a bit more experience rather than just rocking up at a comp every couple of months and having a go at shot put. So I had already started athletics when I joined the Little A's Club. And at my Little A's Club, we were pretty small down in Helensburgh in New South Wales. So there was no multi-class section essentially within our club. So I was competing or in the age group alongside able-bodied athletes. But when I would then go and represent at zone, regional, state, that was when I was in the multi-class level. And back then, to be honest, there wasn't a lot of multi-class athletes, and the program or how it was run itself wasn't absolutely incredible. So like these days, I would say because of the hard work that my club, my coach and my family have done, it's kind of progressed a little bit. And now I think there's more opportunities for multi-class athletes, especially in Little A's, to have those opportunities to go and compete and do a proper competition and have that experience. Whereas back when I started, probably 10, 15 years ago now, it wasn't a smooth run as it is these days.
I think that's the one thing, Dan, that with Little Aths in New South Wales, they were actually fairly pioneering when it came to multi-class, and were definitely one of the more proactive states when it comes to including what they call multi-class. And just for our listeners' understanding, disability sports can be called many different things depending on your sports level and pathway. So a para-athlete, not to be mistaken with a Paralympian, can be called just that, a para-athlete. But they also may be multi-class, all abilities, impaired, ambulant, or para. And that really does depend on the sport or the level that you're involved in. In our podcast, we use the term all abilities or para. However, with Sarah, because she has represented at the Paralympics, that actually allows her to be termed a Paralympian. So we really do try not to term younger para-athletes Paralympians, and a lot of people do it without realising their mistake. But Paralympians are only athletes who have represented at the Paralympics.
Do you think we'll get to the stage, Sarah and Cindy, where we'll just have the one term? Will it just be all abilities, whether you're a Paralympian or not? And obviously, you're a Paralympian, you'll say, well, an all abilities athlete, Sarah Walsh, who's a dual, and hopefully this year, 3-time Paralympian representative.
I don't think there'll ever be a day when the one term is described or used to describe everyone. You can kind of look at it from the point of like an Olympian. You don't really describe kids who are out running at the track as 10-year-olds an Olympian until they've gone to the Olympics. So it's kind of the same with us para-athletes. You kind of earn that title when you go to the Paralympics. And I think then the other terms that are under the umbrella, I guess it's what each athlete feels most comfortable being called, or what kind of sporting area they're in, what term they use. So I know a lot for athletics, it's kind of para-athlete is mainly the term that you would hear. And then it's just kind of depending on what level of sport you're in within athletics as to whether or not the category that you compete in is called para, ambulant, multi-class. So there's probably a time where like the one term should be used across all events within athletics, but I think it's kind of what each individual feels most comfortable being called as well.
I think it's probably, if it was to go down any path, I think it would be more likely to be para-athlete than sort of any of the other terms, because it really does clarify in a lot of, I guess, ordinary everyday people's minds. Paralympics is for athletes with a disability. So if you're a para-athlete, then you're likely to have a disability in some way, shape or form. So, well, yeah, I agree. I don't think there'll ever come a time where it will be across the board, but I think if it did, it probably leans more towards para-athlete than sort of any of the other terms. So, Sarah, when did you realise you really wanted to focus on athletics? You touched on before that you did a lot of sports and that, you were not hated, but definitely didn't enjoy dancing as much as what you could. what made athletics your sport of choice, and what gave you, I guess, a bit of a drive or a bit of a thought that, hey, I could actually be really good at this and take this to the highest level?
So, as I kind of said before, I didn't really have much of a background in athletics. I just started it through school. So, in year 3, that was kind of the year where you'd compete at your school athletics carnival. And then that's the year that you can go on and represent your school at zone, regional if you qualify. So, I competed at my school athletics carnival alongside all my classmates. Had a lot of fun, but came dead last in every event possible. And a few days after the carnival, one of my teachers came up to me and she had the permission slip to go to the zone athletics carnival in a few weeks' time. And she was like, oh, you can go. Like, there's a section for para athletes, or back then I think it was AWD, so athletes with a disability. And she's like, I've put you in every event that you can possibly do. So at the time, 1, 2, long jump and shot put were the events on offer. And of course I said yes. Back then I was 9 years old, and what 9-year-old didn't want a day off school to go and hang out at an athletics track? Yeah. Little did I know that one day off school when I was 9 would lead to a career traveling the world and representing Australia. And I didn't really have a background in athletics at the time. Like, I could barely run 100 meters, let alone 200 meters. I'm still not the strongest person upper body if you've ever come across me. So shot put was definitely not my event. And I just did long jump for a little bit of fun. As I said before, I wasn't the most coordinated kid, so trying to time a run and then a jump into the sandpit was a little bit challenging, but I absolutely loved it and came away with 4 blue ribbons, or whatever they were called at the time. And that meant that I was off to the regional carnival and then did the same at regional and went to state. And I think from then, like, I kind of realized that I absolutely loved the feeling of running. And I guess I always thought I would be a sprinter. Like, I was just doing long jump on the side for a bit of fun. The shot put career was very short lived when I worked out. It definitely wasn't for me. But at the time I was running and doing athletics on my day leg, which back then wasn't really designed for sport. It was kind of designed for getting you from point A to B. We're talking like 15, 17 years ago now, where all the technology that we have today didn't really exist. So it was pretty much a wooden leg. Like, the foot was concrete essentially, and it didn't really give you anything when you were running on the track. So I won my first state title running on that. And after I finished the race, I was kind of complaining to mum that my leg was really sore. And she called up my prosthetist who was making my legs at the time. And she was like, oh, Sarah's in quite a lot of pain today. And he was like, well, what's like different that she's been doing on it? Because she's never experienced this pain before. And mum's like, oh, well, she's just after running 100 and 200 meters at the state championships. And he was like, hang on a minute, that leg isn't designed for that. So essentially, if she wants the pain to go away, and she just needs to stop doing athletics. And I'm not one that takes too kindly to being told that I can't do something. So didn't at all listen to his advice and just kept on pushing through. And a few weeks later, I was in for a routine leg checkup appointment. And when I walked in the door, they had created a carbon fiber blade that I'd only ever seen on the TV for the Paralympics for me. And it was essentially mine. So at the time, I was the youngest person in Australia to have one of those. And I think that was the moment that I realized, hey, with this and my love for athletics, that I could actually take this somewhere. And I kind of remember watching the Paralympics on the TV in 2008 in Beijing, me sitting at home on the couch and watching all the athletes there and thinking to myself, like, when I grow up, I want to be a Paralympian just like them. And I hadn't really found a sport that I had loved. Like, I was trying lots of different sports, and I didn't even know if I would be good enough at one sport to make it there. But I just knew that when I grew up, I wanted to put on the green and gold and represent Australia. So every time that I get to do that, I'm literally living that 10-year-old's dream. And so that makes it all worthwhile. And I think having the blade when I was 9 or 10 really kind of made it an easy choice for me, that athletics was kind of the sport that I loved the most, and the one that if I was going to achieve anything in it was that.
Sarah
when you
Walsh,
got that new blade, Sarah, sorry, Dan, just quickly,
okay.
When you got that new blade, how did it feel to have that difference from what is essentially a concrete foot to this amazing new carbon fiber blade that I'm assuming would be remarkably lighter. What did that do for your mindset, and how did that make you feel?
It just made me feel like I could run. Not that I couldn't run before, because I didn't know any difference to the setup that I was on. But I remember putting it on, and I don't want to say it's like a pogo stick, but it definitely was a lot more bouncier and springier than what I'd been using before. So it kind of just gave me that freedom to be able to run down the track and not have to worry about whether or not I was going to finish the race with stump pain, or whether or not I was going to be able to walk around for the days following it. So it definitely just gave me this freedom and sense that I could do anything.
Sarah Walsh is our guest. She's a dual Paralympian. Hopefully will be a 3-time Paralympian, going to Paris this year as well. She is our guest on Inclusion Talks with myself, Dan Lonigan, and Cindy McDougall for Aussie Home Loans, who deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and also every capital city. So, Sarah, you didn't know anything about this blade. It was all, you just turned up at a routine appointment and your doctor says, here you go, Sarah. I can't stop you from doing what you want to do. You've obviously got a lot of ability in athletics. You're passionate, but you need something a little bit better than what you've got at the moment. This will help.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of had the belief from people around me, or people saw potential in me that maybe I didn't really see in myself as a 9-year-old girl. And it definitely transformed my life and kind of gave me this opportunity to be able to go and do the sport that I loved. And as a 10-year-old, you don't know whether or not you're going to grow up and be successful in sport. But that blade kind of gave me the opportunity to see if I could. And like, I'll be forever grateful for that opportunity. And like with my sport these days, and essentially at a high level, if you are missing one of your limbs, like, you can't really do athletics at a high level without technology. So even these days, staying up to date with the new technology that arises or comes on the market is super important, because that can be what hinders you from reaching your potential at an international level, or sometimes that can be the reason that athletes don't make the podium if they're not using the latest technology or the technology that's right for them.
But on that one, Sarah, are the blades expensive, and do you have to actually change them regularly? I'm guessing when you're using them continually for training and for competition, that they would possibly adjust their size or alter slightly. What sort of is the process around that?
Yeah, so blades and just prosthetics in general are super expensive. So the blade itself, so without the rest of the setup, you're essentially looking at a minimum of 5 figures just for the blade itself.
Wow.
And then on top of that, you need the setup and everything that goes with it, the time and energy that it takes someone to build that. So they're not cheap, that's for sure. And the same with other prosthetics as well, day-to-day prosthetics or whatever prosthetics you use. They're also not the cheapest things on the market. But for me, essentially, I have the one blade that I use in training and competition, and then I have a spare one that's not fully set up in case something does happen to that blade that can just be transferred over quickly. There is no shelf life essentially on them, but you do find, or I find, after using the same blade for maybe 2 years, you kind of, when you transfer over to a new blade, you can definitely feel that the carbon has kind of become a little bit more softer in it. They say, especially when you're doing long jump, you can put 8 times more force through a blade than what you would running. So you do put quite a lot of force through this carbon. So that kind of does soften it over time, but it still remains quite stiff in that sense. And then I've seen people who have snapped them as well. So you kind of always need a backup option just in case, but there is no time frame on like when they need to be changed.
So Dan, for your awareness, sorry, Dan, being a pain. for your awareness, there's also athletes that compete with AFOs, which are sort of, again, have to be updated regularly and fitted. My mum actually wore one for most of her adult life. And that's why I asked Sarah about the time frame, because I know my mum had to go in every 2 years and have hers changed, and she'd actually swap them over and have new ones fitted and have to have measurements. So I was really interested to see about the shelf life and especially how training and using them so consistently at such a force and such pressure would actually alter that, especially when they are so expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these days, like, I'm also not growing anymore. Like, growing up with a prosthetic, I like to say it's like kind of when you're young and you grow out of your shoes and you need a new pair of shoes. It's quite easy to duck down to Kmart or Big W and pick up a $20 pair. It's not so easy just to duck down to one of those shops and pick up a brand new leg there as well. So when I was growing up, I was kind of going through new legs every 3 or 4 months. So there were some years that I would have to get a brand new leg 4 times a year, and a few times where you'd kind of get it made. So they make a cast of your leg and then they take that cast and go and make the final product of the leg. And that process is usually fairly quick. So you're talking anywhere from a week to 3 weeks. And sometimes by the end of that process, I'd already outgrown or grown too much for it to actually fit me still. So that was kind of challenging growing up, but like that was my normal. I would get a new leg every couple of months, and that was kind of like how you get a new pair of shoes.
I mean, you're quite, when I say blasé is not the right term, but I mean, you're used to it, but it's very expensive, as you said. So if I can ask you this, how are you able to fund it, or how are you able to fund the blades when they need to be replaced, because they are expensive?
Yeah, so for blades, I've been very lucky and fortunate that I've always been sponsored by one of the companies that make prosthetic legs. So at the moment, I'm sponsored by OSA, who are the kind of main blade company in the market, essentially. So I'm very lucky that I've never had to put any of my own money towards a prosthetic leg. And then in terms of day legs and all the other legs that I need for day-to-day living, they've always been funded by government, either state government in New South Wales when I was younger, or now through the NDIS.
Which is absolutely fantastic, Sarah, because I mean, you probably couldn't compete, and other athletes in your situation couldn't compete if you didn't have the support. Do you think it'll always be the case, or are you concerned? There's been a lot of chat about the role of NDIS in recent times, certainly in this state. It may be a bit different in New South Wales, excuse my ignorance, but do you remain confident that support, that financial support, will always be there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a lot of people who lose their leg via birth or in early childhood, NDIS is kind of the option that they go down. I guess for people who lose their leg in accidents or things like that, it's normally like insurance or work cover that kind of covers that. So that's probably where it gets a little bit more challenging trying to get the NDIS involved. But for those people that have a fairly straightforward case, I think the NDIS is an incredible route to go down to help people who are living with a disability or who are amputees access everything that they need to in order to live the life that they want to. And I think that's super important. I know from my experience with the NDIS that how much they're interested in how you can live day to day the best way possible, or how you want to live life day to day, and what products or technology or leg parts essentially help that.
That's awesome. Now, just getting back onto the sports side, Sarah, getting into para athletics, there's all the different levels. So of course you've gone through from grassroots to through the school system, through the little system, through seniors and into international. When we were talking about funding, how do you find the actual funding for competitions and training? I know sort of for I guess city-based athletes, it's probably a little bit easier than what it is for regional ones that don't travel for training and what have you. But how do you find that, on top of everything else, being able to make teams and I guess be able to do your best?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being an athlete is challenging enough in the fact that you give up a lot of your time for training and to be able to have those moments of success at an international level. But the journey along the way can definitely be challenging at times. And financially, a lot of athletes do struggle as well. Like a lot of travel domestically during the athletic season is needed to qualify for those big events. And the majority of the time, it is coming out of your own pocket to be able to fund plane trips, competition fees, accommodation. And this year alone, I think there was a point where I was away 7 weekends in a row, either traveling or competing. So it is a lot of time away from my home base. And to be able to fund things myself, like I'm lucky that I am a funded athlete, but that funding can change based on how you perform at those big international events. I also choose to work part-time on the side as well to be able to just have a little bit more of a buffer in my bank account to know that if I do need to drop everything and fly across to Perth to do a last minute competition, that I've got the funds there. But it's definitely, especially athletics, it's not a sport where you're making a lot of money, and especially in the para space as well. There's not a lot of opportunities to get prize money or, like our able-bodied counterparts, head overseas and just hang out in Europe for a few months earning money by racing or competing over there. So I'm lucky in the sense that I am funded, so there is money coming into my bank account, but it definitely at times you do need to be proactive in how you're earning money or having that extra money in your bank account to get by.
Travel, you said you travel a lot. How do you find the motivation to be your best and maintain your connections with your family and your friends and those sort of, I guess, closest to you? Because 7 weeks away is a heck of a lot of time that takes away from being able to connect with the people that I guess are your support base and are the ones that help you be able to do your best. So what do you find is the best thing to keep that motivation and keep those connections active?
It's kind of one of those funny things. Like I look back on it now and I absolutely love traveling and going away for competitions. And sometimes you do just want to spend a day at home sitting on the couch watching Netflix. And then more recently, I've had those days and I'm like, oh, I wish I could just be like back traveling, back out competing, doing that sort of stuff. But I think my family and friends are super understanding of the situation that I'm in. And I think it's just really important to surround yourself with people who understand and who are accepting of the path or the phase of life that I'm in at the moment. Like, I'm not going to be an elite athlete forever. Like, it's something that you can only do for such a short period of your lifetime. So I want to make the most of it while I can and say yes to those opportunities to go and compete places last minute and travel around and do what I love. And the people that I'm surrounded by understand that, and they understand that I'm not going to be able to show up as well as I can every week throughout the year. But there's times or periods throughout the year when they're less busy or it's in the off season and I'm not traveling. And that's kind of when you spend that quality time with people. But in season, it can be pretty busy and hectic, but I get to do what I love. So it doesn't feel like a chore or hard work to be able to pack up a suitcase and go away.
Your family and coaches get to come with you?
Yeah, so a lot of my domestic travel this year, I'm traveling with people from my squad here in Canberra, my coach. We had our World Championships a few weeks ago in Japan, and my coach and one of my training partners were a part of the team. So the three of us were over there together, which is very special to be able to have like the person that you train alongside with and your coach there as well, who you spend so many hours a week at the track or in the gym together. So to be able to have that kind of pinnacle moment that you train for together is pretty special. And then my family also came and watched as well. So I'm very lucky that when I get to look up in the stands somewhere crazy around the world, that I see my mum and dad, my sisters and my auntie. So that kind of makes the journey very special as well.
This is Inclusion Talks, looking at all ability sport, and we've got a star with us today. They're all stars, but a legitimate star, dual Paralympian, hoping to get to Paris. We'll talk about that in just a second. Sarah Walsh, and we're here for Aussie Home Loans. Dan Lonigan and Cindy McDougall, your co-hosts for this. And Aussie Home Loans have got plenty of areas of expertise right around Australia. Purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, and personal loans. So, Sarah, as we've said, you've been to 2 Paralympics. Did you think back in 2016, when you were still a teenager, that you were a chance to go to those Paralympics? And when the opportunity came, can you remember how you felt being so young and having achieved your goal for someone so young?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from like going from that little 10-year-old girl who was sitting on her couch watching the Paralympics to then being 8 years later that person who was at the Paralympics, it is kind of very special. And I still find it really hard to put into words how much that means to me. Like I'm so proud of everything that I've achieved. And I remember in Rio, I finished competing and I hadn't really jumped the distance that I thought I would at the time or what I knew I was capable of. But to me, like that didn't really matter at all. Like on the day, I could have come dead last or first. And I don't think the feeling that I felt after competition would have changed. I remember my coach at the time, I saw him after comp and he was trying to tell me like all the things that I did good and what we can work on going forward. And I remember just turning to him and saying, look, I don't really care what you have to say right now. I just became a Paralympian, and that means more to me than any position or medal or any advice that you want to tell me right now. And I just broke down in tears because that was my dream. That was my one goal as a kid was to be a Paralympian. And now aiming for my 3rd Paralympics, when I think about it or take a step back and think about it, like at no point did I ever think that I would be going to a 3rd Paralympics, let alone in the position I am now where I'm fighting for a medal or a spot on the podium. And I get to do what I love every day, and to know that I can do it at the highest level is just incredible.
What was the experience like? Was it everything you thought it would be and more, going to the first one? And were there times, being so young, even though you're very mature, still being a teenager, that it overwhelmed you, or you seem to have a pretty mature head on your shoulders, that you were there to do a job, you were representing your country, you weren't really all that overwhelmed?
I would say I still get quite overwhelmed. It's one of those things where, like, you know, you have a job to do and you know you're there to do the job, but at the same time, it's still very overwhelming. Um, it's one of the most unique places in the world going to a Paralympics. You're in a village with thousands of other people who have a disability, and there's really no point ever in your life where you're surrounded by more people with a disability than without, and that's the Paralympic village. And you're all there to do the same thing, and that is compete the best that you can. Maybe some people have goals to be on the podium, some are just there to enjoy the moment, but you're all part of this very unique experience. And competing at the Paralympics, or my first Paralympics, even my second one, they are more than what you expect. Like, yeah, you have a job to do and you want to do it to the best that you can, but you also want to enjoy the moment. Like, I don't know, after Paris, as much as I would like to go to many more Paralympics, you never know what's going to happen in an athlete's career or lifetime as to whether or not going to your next Paralympics is possible. So it's just about being in the moment and enjoying the Paralympics and the Paralympic experience, because you never know if it is going to be your last one. It's a lot of hard work to get there. But I think Rio and then Tokyo, they were both 2 very different Paralympic experiences. Rio being my first games in South America, like it was absolutely incredible as an 18-year-old to experience that and compete and have my childhood dream come true. And then Tokyo, the kind of world was flipped around upside down with COVID and lockdowns. And I look back on that experience now, and I look back on that experience with people who were there. And sometimes we just have to laugh because how different that was to 5 years prior. And the things that we were doing in Tokyo to just be able to compete, like COVID testing every day, things like that. And these days just seem so bizarre and so weird, but the experience was just as special. And I don't think I would have changed that for the world. Like, yeah, there were some nights we're standing in an empty stadium that could be filled with 70,000 people wondering what it would be like. But then the day I competed, I had people from the Australian team in the stands, and you could hear them so clearly cheering for you. And so it just felt like the stadium was packed full of tens of thousands of people cheering for me, even though it was only 4 people. So, like, that experience is something that I will forever remember. But I just absolutely, like, couldn't put into words how those experiences are.
Do you think going to, sorry, Cindy, do you think going to
you go.
Tokyo made you a better person? What I mean by that, I mean, in regard to resilience, because we thought that the Olympic going, well, they didn't go ahead in 2020 because of COVID around the world. And they went ahead in 2021, as you say, predominantly to empty stadiums for both the Olympics and Paralympics. But did it increase your resilience? Not the resilience probably needed to be increased, but did it take it to another level?
Yeah, I think so. I think it also made me realize that I can't take what I do for granted. Like, in one moment, like one day you're training for something that was going to happen in 6 months' time, and then the next day it was what it felt like was it was ripped away from you, and what you were training for and everything that you kind of worked for and essentially was living for was no longer happening when you thought it was. And to be honest, we didn't know if it was going to happen even the following year. So it's kind of like you were training for this thing that you didn't actually know if you were going to go to and achieve.
Almost
And so I think
happened.
having that realization that, like, I get to do what I love every day, but it may not always be there. And then also, I think it gave me the opportunity to try different things in long jump. That extra time that we had gave me the opportunity to change my technique, which has definitely made me a better long jumper. And kind of going through all those processes in training has definitely challenged me as a person and as an athlete, but I've come out better on the other side from it. But Tokyo also, I think, coming back from Tokyo and seeing how Australia responded to the Paralympics, it made me realize, like, how when something does happen in the world, like, everyone does come together and back and support each other. Like, the response from the Paralympics in Tokyo was unlike, I think, any of us athletes could have imagined. I think most people had nothing better to do in the 10th lockdown of the 18 months, and the Paralympics were on, and it gave them something to kind of watch and support every day. And I'm lucky to kind of be a part of that, where it kind of took away from the feelings that people were feeling during COVID and give them an outlet and something to be able to focus on, and, like, to be a part of that movement is pretty special.
Do you think that we're a great sporting nation? You touched on how, we had COVID, so we had really no other options but to sit around and watch TV and watch the sport. Do you think the coverage and recognition of parasport and disability sports grown since your first international competition? And is it something that you see growing more into the future? How would you like to see maybe the media increase their promotion of parasport, not necessarily just in Australia, but around the world?
I think it's definitely getting better. I think London 2012 Paralympics was definitely a turning point in people kind of tuning in to watch the Paralympics, and maybe more so realizing that Paralympics and Olympics are on the same playing field. Like, we train just as hard as our Olympic counterparts, some of us probably even harder to have to overcome your disability and the challenges that you face. And then the Paralympics is our Olympics, essentially. So that is the pinnacle moment of our sporting career and our sporting journey. And so I think after those games, a lot of people who probably wouldn't have tuned in kind of realized that it was something that was out there for people with a disability. And then every kind of Paralympic cycle, I think the coverage and support gets a little bit better. I think we still have a long way to go before it's on an equal playing field with the Olympics when you look at sponsorship opportunities or even the simple things about these days when people are talking about Paris. They'll either say the Paris Olympics are on in July or August, whenever it is, but they kind of forget to mention the Paralympics in that as well. And I think they either just assume that people will know that it's on, or they completely just forget about it. And I think until that's something that kind of rolls off people's tongues, we're probably not on the same playing field as the Olympians.
Will it roll off people's tongues though, Sarah? I mean, that's the issue, isn't it? I mean, we've been sort of having this debate for a long, long time now. We probably shouldn't be having this debate because Australia, as Cindy said, have got an outstanding record when it comes to Paralympics, one of the best performed nations, constantly performing well, very consistent, whether it be gold medals, silver medals, bronze medals, lots of wonderful athletes on the podium.
I would hope that one day in the future it definitely becomes more common than not. I think with Brisbane 2032 Paralympics and Olympics on, I think here in Australia will probably become a more common or more normal thing to be said, especially having a home games. And I hope that carries around the rest of the world as well. I think the more people that kind of talk about the Paralympics to other people, then that word kind of spreads through. And like that's how we're going to be big and successful or continue our success and the trajectory that we're on now, is having people support us and having those conversations around the Paralympics and people with a disability.
On that one, Sarah, if you were to go back and give some advice to the young you, or if you were going to give some advice to, an up-and-coming young athlete with a disability who knows that Brisbane's coming, or interested in, giving that a go and maybe building up to the highest level, what advice would you give, or what message would you give them about the journey and how to, I guess, get the best out of themselves and what to look out for and what the good things are? And yeah, what message would you give?
I think when I look back at my younger self, she probably wouldn't have known what was actually ahead of her. As incredible as being able to make a Paralympics is and travel the world and put on the green and gold and represent Australia, it's definitely not easy either. I think for me, it's about enjoying the processes and the journey along the way. I train in Canberra, so it's freezing cold right now. So trying to get warm to go out and do a training session can sometimes be a bit of a struggle. But what's getting me through at the moment is the chance that Paris is only 2.5 months away. And that's kind of what I'm aiming for. So the cold weather is just a small part of the story at the moment. But I think my advice to younger people or people on their journey or wanting to go to the Paralympics in 2032 or maybe the ones after that is just find what you love doing and enjoy getting there, I think, because when you get there, it's one of the most incredible experiences that you could ever possibly have. But just find what you love, and if you love it enough and you're determined and you are essentially kind of good at what you do, like it'll make the journey a bit easier.
This is Inclusion Talks. Sorry, Cindy.
Dan.
Inclusion Talks with Cindy McDougall and Dan Lonigan. Sarah Walsh is our guest. She is a dual Paralympian in the long jump and hoping to get to Paris in a couple of months' time to make it a 3-time Paralympian, which is an outstanding achievement. Mind you, 1 is magnificent, 2 is superb, 3 is sublime as far as I'm concerned. The opinions are like backsides. We can deal with anyone in Australia. We have clients in every state and also capital city, and over 25 lenders on our panel for our major sponsor, Aussie Home Loans. All yours, Cindy.
You're currently studying for your bachelor's degree in sports science. So when you were mentioning, your goals, life is an important goal as well. Like sport isn't your entire life. What are your long-term goals, not just in sport, but career goals? Obviously, you love sport that much, you've chosen it as a career path. Yeah. So what I'm really interested to hear what your overall goals are, not just your sports goals.
Yeah, I think being in the sporting world from such a young age, it was kind of always instilled in me that you kind of always needed something else outside of sport. Like I went to my first Paralympics when I was 18, and I came back from having one of my most incredible experiences of my life to come and sit my HSC Year 12 exams 2 weeks later. So
Wow.
I've always kind of been brought down to earth pretty quickly after those pinnacle or high events. So it was something that I never even thought twice about back then, like dropping out of school or giving up on school, because I knew that it was important, and I knew that one day my career would kind of finish and I'd need something else to go and do. Like, as much as I love long jump, my body isn't going to allow me to run and throw myself into a sandpit when I'm 40 years old, as much as I would love to do that. So when I finished school, moved out of home, moved down to Canberra, I knew that like studying was something that I wanted to do, but I also knew that in 10, 15 years, whenever my career finished, that was then there for me. So I am studying sport and exercise science at the moment. I study part-time, so I am now 6 years into my 3-year sports science degree. You can ask me in a few more years whether or not I'm any closer to being finished, and kind of what I want to do with that. Like, I absolutely love being in the sporting world and helping people. I don't really have my heart set on like one career path just yet. But I know kind of when the time is right to finish my career and transition into the next phase of life, that I kind of have that background experience and knowledge in the bank to be able to help me. But also as an athlete now, I think studying in the sporting world and kind of understanding why you're doing things a certain way or why people are telling you to do things a certain way has really helped. But it's then also helped me as an athlete have a voice or input into my training as well. Like, I'm not just standing there being told to and not having any idea like why. And I think it's just having accountability as well for your career and performance, and having a voice has been really important. So that's kind of helped me, or studying in that sporting world has helped me as well. As to what I want to do when I retire, I'm still kind of no closer to figuring that out. I'd like to hope that I have a few more Paralympics in me if the body holds up and I can continue loving it. So as long as I can keep running down the runway and rolling around in the sandpit, I think I will. And then when the time comes to transition into the next phase of life, I'm sure something will pop up along the way, or I'll find kind of the area that I want to spend the next phase of life in.
So you'd love to get to Brisbane, which is 2032. Not a lot of athletes get an opportunity to go to home Olympic Games or a home Paralympics. I mean, that's obviously something on the radar.
Yeah, I'm not saying yes and I'm not saying no is probably the best way to put it at the moment. Like, we've got Paris this year and then LA in another 4 years. And I'm not saying that I'll be a little bit older in Brisbane, but I'll probably be coming to the tipping end of my career. I'll be heading on 34 then. Like, I'm still competing against girls who are in their mid to late 30s and jumping as best as they ever can. So there's no never say never, but I'm not giving you an exclusive scoop that I'm definitely hanging around until then. But I'm not saying that I'm not either. It's probably the best way to go. I think we'll just see how Paris goes, and then what's in store for the 4 years after that, and then another 4 years after that. It's such a long time away when you think about it in the sporting world, and that's 8 years of full-time training, 6 days a week, twice a day. And at some point, my body will probably want to stop, but we'll just see when that is.
I'll tell you secretly, I'm hoping that if you're not there personally, that you've got a beautiful little stable of long jumpers that you're training up for their own success by then.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know what life will look like tomorrow, let alone in 8 years' time. So we'll just see what happens. But I'm open to anything.
So how confident are you that you'll be chosen for Paris? You've got the experience of 2 Paralympics already, and if you are chosen for Paris, will you see yourself as one of the team leaders, considering the previous experience you've already had in both Rio and Tokyo?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I've done everything that I need to essentially qualify for Paris. It's just kind of waiting on the selection. So for me, waiting on the phone call to say you're officially on the team. So it's that fun, pointy end of kind of the qualifying period where there's not much more that I can do, and we're training as if we're going to be on that plane in August and competing in the Paralympic Stadium the end of August, but it's just waiting for that phone call. And I guess with my experience of 2 previous Paralympics and 5 World Championships now, I was the team captain of the World Championships team last year when we were over in Paris alongside some other incredible Aussie athletes. And it's kind of a real pinch yourself moment, because I remember being on my first team as a young 15, 16-year-old, and you're looking up to people who are 10 years older than you and have achieved so many incredible things. And then last year, like, I was that person that people were looking up to and coming to for advice. And I think it's really important, everything that I've learned along the way, traveling and competing and representing Australia, to be able to share that with the people who are coming through to make their kind of team experience a little bit easier. As I said before, it is pretty overwhelming, even when you are a regular at it and someone that does it like on the regular for many years. It still kind of has that sense of overwhelmment, and I can only imagine what someone coming in for the first time is 14, 15 years old feels. So to pass on my experience and be a leader within the sport is something that I think is really important for me.
Could you carry the flag at the opening ceremony, considering this is likely to be your 3rd Paralympics?
Can we hope?
Once again, never say never, but I do compete fairly early in the program. So I think I'm on day 2 of the Paralympics, maybe day 3. So I'd say the chances of even going to the opening ceremony are pretty slim for me. Just being that close to competition, I have yet to go to an opening ceremony. So I didn't go to the one in Rio, as I was competing day 2 there as well. And then Tokyo, we didn't really send athletes to the opening ceremony. So I can't see myself carrying the flag, just on the basis that I probably won't be there. But we do have some pretty phenomenal athletes on the Paralympic team who have been to many more Paralympics than I have, and who are very successful and very good at what they do. So I'm sure whoever gets chosen to be the flag bearer and lead the team out will do an incredible job.
Now, the other question I wanted to ask you was, what are your aspirations for a medal at these games, should you be selected? It's a double-barreled question. There is obviously that situation where you've done everything you can, as you said earlier, to be selected, and Sarah Walsh is our guest, dual Paralympian, hoping to make it 3 times in Paris. You'll find out soon. Thanks to Aussie Home Loans for our weekly podcast on Inclusion Talks with Dan Lonigan and Cindy McDougall. There's that thing that annoys me a little bit in Athletics Australia, and Cindy knows where I'm going here, selection discretion. Are you a bit concerned about that? And should you be selected, which I think you should, considering your experience, how confident are you of being on the podium?
So we had our World Championships in Japan a couple of weeks ago now. I finished 4th and was 11 centimetres off a bronze medal. So, like, I'm going to Paris aiming for a spot on the podium, but anything can happen on the day. And you just want to put a performance out there that you can be proud of at the end of the day. But definitely on the podium is kind of where I'm at the moment, or wanting to be in and around the medal position. So that's definitely the goal for the Paralympics. In regards to selection, I would say I'm fairly safe or fairly confident at the moment, but once again, you never know. And I know Athletics Australia will always pick the team in which they think will have the most chance for success at the Paralympics. So they have a job to do, and I know they'll do it to the best that they can.
I'll ask you,
just for your awareness,
yeah.
So in athletics, there are A and B qualifiers. And I know we discussed this last night with our Lohos, but the A and B qualifiers are quite high when it comes to some of the other countries. So the ones that definitely do make our Paralympics are the ones that are sitting as close to medaling as we can be. And Sarah's done some pretty amazing performances in the lead up. So I personally would like to think that she will be on that plane. But yeah, we just have to wait and see. And you know, everyone that does make that team is going to be a worthy member of the Australian team.
I don't have any doubt about that. But I mean, I still think it's got to be a little bit more black and white than it is. Now, you may not be able to answer this one, Sarah, and you don't have to. But if you are doing the performances and have done the performances in the past, which you have done, should you be automatic instead of this selection discretion, which is certainly frustrating me, and not only just frustrates me, but frustrates others in the media that are closer to the sport than I am?
I think Athletics Australia put together a selection policy, and it's up to us athletes to be able to understand that and know how selection will work. And for as long as I can remember, there's always been that discretion in selection, and I guess it's about who they think will be able to perform the best at a major championships. And in regards to like Olympic and Paralympic selection, they're slightly different. And the means in which you qualify are also very different. So I know probably in the para space, it's probably a little bit more black and white as to what you need to do to be able to be considered for selection. And then even once being nominated by Athletics Australia, it is actually up to the Paralympic team to confirm your selection as well. So it's kind of out of the hands of Athletics Australia. Once they've put forward the nominations as to who they would like to see go to a Paralympic Games, it's up to Paralympics Australia then to approve that and pick the people that they want on the team.
So how do you keep yourself busy? Yeah, that's a great response. Great response. And I hope the question didn't put you under the pump too much, but I have been in the past, not so much now. I'm an old softie, Sarah, but you've got to be a hard-hitting journalist and ask the hard questions every now and again. And you're a very good opening bat, like the great Bruce Laird from WA in the 70s. You played a straight bat to that magnificently to a very good delivery online. So what do you do until you get that phone call saying you're on the plane, you're off to Paris? How do you keep yourself occupied? Because it is out of your control now. Alice said this yesterday. It's out of her control. Or last week, I should say. You can't do much about the uncontrollables. Is that sort of your attitude?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, us athletes have done everything that we can to qualify, and those that are still trying to qualify have the next few weeks to do that. And then when the end of June comes, like, everyone has kind of done what they need to, or everything that they can, to be considered for selection. And essentially you kind of have a fair idea whether or not you'll be in contention or not, based on whether or not you've done the qualifiers and met the selection criteria, and you train as if you are going to be competing on the world stage come August. And until you get the phone call to say otherwise, you train, or the mindset is that you'll be there. But you always kind of have in the back of your mind that kind of waiting, seeing if you will be on the team, seeing if you will be selected. But most of the time you are mentally preparing as if you'll be there until you're told otherwise.
So if, and we don't think it will, but if it goes against you, how do you, obviously you've got scenarios in place about how you prepare for that. Obviously, it won't stop you from training. Do you take a little bit of a break, or do you just get stuck straight back into it?
It's kind of not something that I've really thought about at the moment. Like, we're preparing to go there and compete. And as I said before, until you're told otherwise, nothing is really in place for that.
Great answer.
Love that.
Great answer. Well, Sarah, we really appreciate your time. We're pretty confident you'll be on that plane going to Paris for a third Paralympics, which is an outstanding performance. So I haven't got all the stats in front of me, but I mean, you probably know, Cindy, and you too, Sarah, better than I would. How many Paralympians have we had that have gone to 3? There wouldn't be a heap, would there? I mean, 3's a great achievement. We've had a few Olympians go to 3.
The numbers off the top of my head, but we've definitely had a few athletes end up going to 8. I think that might be
8?
the record to beat at the moment. Yeah, so I don't think I'm going to quite get to that level, but I'll take 3 or above, definitely.
I think you'd be surprised, Dan, just how many actually do multiple Paralympics. We are incredibly resilient. We are incredibly strong, and we have great longevity in disability sports, especially at Paralympic levels. So, yeah, I think you'd be very surprised at the numbers of multiple Paralympians, but still that does not downgrade the effort of making 2, and hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll hear that will be 3.
I mean, 8 is 28 years. I've got James Tompkins coming up on my Dashing Dan Olympic Adventures podcast for Aussie Home Loans, and he did 6 in 20 years as a rower, 6 consecutive from 88 to 2008. And that is a mighty achievement as well. But to do 8 over 28 years, I mean, that is unbelievable.
Incredible.
Unbelievable. I mean, you just...
Yeah, pretty impressive.
Oh, very impressive. I mean, one is, as I said earlier, one is magnificent, but 8, gee, that's out of this world. Sarah, really appreciate your time. Your story is one of the great ones. You've been there twice. We think you'll be there for a 3rd time. We hope it's not the last time. Have you been to Paris before?
Yes, I have. We had our World Championships there last year, so definitely know what I'm in for, and I know the French will put on a very good show and hopefully draw the crowds to the games.
And you know the language, because with the greatest respect to a lot of the Parisians, unless you have a crack, and I've been there a couple of times before, and I've got a very broad Aussie accent, as you're aware. I did do French at school, and I at least have tried to put some words together when I've asked for coffee or directions. Do you know enough French to get by? Because some of them, whether it's a good thing or bad thing, won't talk to you unless you at least try and speak their language.
I went there last year knowing bonjour, and I've come out being able to order some things at a cafe. So I say I've slightly improved my French.
Well.
Hopefully after a few more weeks there this time, I might be able to maybe have a few words of a conversation strung together, but no guarantees.
Oh,
Love it.
I'm sure you'll be fine. Well, Sarah, again, thanks so much for joining us on Inclusion Talks with Cindy and Dan for Aussie Home Loans. And again, a shout out to Wendy and the team at Aussie Home Loans around Australia. Their areas of expertise are purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers. They certainly look after them, equipment loans, car loans, personal loans, any sort of loan. They've got over 25 lenders on their panel. We wish you all the best. Good luck with selection. And thanks so much for being part of the program today. It's been sensational.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you.